So there was an interview with not Michael Flynn, but James Comey about Michael Flynn and how his perceived crime could be used as blackmail by the Russians. What I find totally strange about this interview, and the link is below, and I linked it with Gary Franchi. I don't want to give the news networks any kind of credit for, or any kind of views or anything. They just don't deserve it. So getting back to the story, they tried to say that Russians had material enough to blackmail Michael Flynn. All right. Problem is that the only crime that Michael Flynn has been charged with is lying to the FBI. Now, the Russians are not going to go and blackmail Michael Flynn because he lied to the FBI. That's idiotic. The only crime, and is the only crime that he's been charged with. So, what material would the Russians have to blackmail General Flynn? What material? There is none. And it's just a simple deduction. That's all it is. And our news, the so-called news, just can't seem to pin that. They just can't seem to grasp that idea that you actually have to have a link. You just can't point to somebody and say they could be blackmailed by the Russians. And this, the backdrop to the story is that if you go back 2 years, the day of the election, November 8th, Obama came out and actually stated that there was no interference by the Russians because he didn't want Hillary Clinton's victory to be tainted in any way. Now, if the Russians interfered or not, it still isn't really disclosed because I'm not exactly sure, outside of taking some ad on Facebook and Google, which was very small in value, and trolling. What else did they do? What other evidence do they have? They have very little evidence that the Russians did pretty much anything, Nothing substantial, nothing to actually change votes or anything like that. If they put an ad in Google for, what was it, $4,700 or some ridiculously low number like that, I mean, how many votes did that affect? Nobody. But so on November the 8th, Obama came out, and this was reiterated by many news stations, that the Russians did not interfere with the elections. So at that point, there was really no case of any kind, because according to official status, there was no interference, there was no collusion, there was nothing by the Russians, November 8th. A short time after that, Obama's administration did it in about face, and they started evicting Russian diplomats and closing some far out of the middle of nowhere. It's just off by a hillside somewhere, some building that the Russians were using. There wasn't even, couldn't even consider a spy building. It was just some random building out in the middle of nowhere. And then this is what prompted the calls to Michael Flynn by the Russian ambassador. And, Michael Flynn was where was he, in Bermuda or someplace like that? And so he really didn't even have the information at hand. He just talked to the Russian ambassador and tried to calm him down, basically. And that's what they're getting him on? That's the whole case? Especially after Obama came out and said that there was no interference to begin with? And then they're saying that Trump could be in the same situation, that he can have material against him that the Russians can use as a blackmail. And this is all due to the failed building in Moscow that never took place. And I'm you have to kind of wonder exactly how would the Russians blackmail Trump, considering that nothing was done. There was a proposal. So unless the Russians had something on Trump to say, you better come over here and put a building down, because that doesn't make sense. you know? So Trump didn't even follow through with this, but just say that he did follow through. Say that he went over and put a building. And what would the Russians have on Trump to be able to blackmail? I mean, think about it. It's kind of like a squeeze on a shop owner or something, you know? It's not the shop owner goes to the mob and say, you better hand over insurance money, right? It's the other way around, you know? And if Trump is like the shop owner, he's the one to be squeezed. He's not the one doing the squeezing. You know what I'm saying? He's the one that they're going to try to get something out of. They're the corruption. So it would never actually go on to Trump and say that he was corrupt in this. You know, he would be falling in and doing what their demands. And he's a building owner. He's probably done something like that, but it's not on him. It's on the people trying to get something extra out of him, you know? Take, for example, in Canada, we had Jack Layton putting a little bit on some builders, and he got a nice, what was it, a penthouse corner apartment for like dirt cheap or something like that. That's kind of a corruption case. That's something that you can say, hey, that's blackmail material. Not the building, not the guy who put the building up. It's the guy trying to get something out of the builder. So it's the whole thing, and this totally ridiculous statement that they were saying that Trump, it would have been blackmailed by the Russians. It's totally ridiculous. There's nothing there for him to be blackmailed against. And just one more thing too is during the interview, Comey came out and said it. Another one of dozens of lies that he said. He basically said that Steele's dossier, he didn't know if Steele's dossier was legit or not. Okay. Now, taking into account that before all this, the Steele dossier was handed over to the FBI, and the FBI rejected it on the basis that it was not, what's the word, trustworthy. It wasn't reliable. It wasn't an authentic source. And they just kind of dismissed it. And that's why the Steele dossier came in by the State Department, not by the FBI. No intelligence agency brought in that dossier. They would have rejected it at the doorstep. They would have said, no thank you. But it got brought in and then got leaked by the State Department. You know? So the FBI already looked at this and said, no, we're not taking this in. And Comey should have known that. Or else maybe Comey's just a big idiot, which is possible the way he's acting these days. You just don't know. But, you know, he is head of the FBI, something that big. He should have at least been aware of something like that coming into the department. Anyway, just more amnesia, more, you know, short-term memory loss by the media. And it just doesn't seem, it seems to, their conditions seem to be getting worse. I don't think there's a cure for those guys. I think, you know, that's it. They're going to be in a rubber room soon enough. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks.